quite a quite a situation. Whereby now we've got a story that is gone national, and that is Edwin Edwards, of course, announcing for Congress in the 6th District, the former 4-term governor of Louisiana, of course, convicted felon. And now to discuss the implications of all this and where we go from here, we've got an all-star panel joining us. And let's bring on first our ringside all-star who checks in with us, of course, every Tuesday, and that is a publisher of Bayoubuzz.com, Steve Sabodowski, to introduce who else are joining us for this historic interview that it's going to be right on not only WGSO.com and the airways here on 990 AM, but also at Bayoubuzz.com via this Google Hangout. And Steve, good morning, sir.
Hey, Jeff, and hi to everybody. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah, this is, I think, hopefully historic in terms of we're talking about something that's really important to Louisiana and also to the nation, I believe. For many reasons. Today we have Jim Brown. Jim not only is a personal friend of Governor Edwards, but he's also the publisher of the biography of Edwin Edwards, Governor Edwin Edwards, and also we have Tyler Bridges. Tyler, who is a reporter for the Lens, lensnola.org. Basically, he wrote a book about Edwin Edwards, and I'm sure Tyler will talk about that in a few seconds, in terms of the election with David Duke, and also the incredible campaign for the gambling. So this is going to be, this is right now on Bayoubuzz.com. It's also on Facebook. It's on Google+, but anybody can go to Bayoubuzz, top of the page, every page, and watch us talk and watch this event. Thank you so much.
Well, Steve, thanks for setting it up, and thanks to our other guests. And if I could start off, Jim Brown, I want to welcome you and invite you to start us off here. Jim, were you surprised yesterday that Edwin Edwards made this decision to actually run? A lot of speculation that he was just sort of doing it for the drama, the attention. In the end, he wasn't going to run, but of course, he made the announcement to enter the race for Congress. Did that surprise you, Jim?
Not really, Jeff. There's been rumors for some time, and I think that those who've been plugged in at the state capitol came to the conclusion several weeks ago. He was telling close friends that he was going to run, but he wanted to make the announcement official himself. And you're right that Edwin Edwards does love the limelight. He is a political rock star when it comes to wanting attention. I agree with you on that. But he's also pretty calculated. I mean, the guy's 86 years old, got a new baby, will be 87 when Election Day comes around. So in his mind, he had to be pretty convinced that he can win this race, or he just would not run. He's not out there to get beat in his mind, and he's run polls, and I've not seen the polls, but from his opinion at least, he feels like he can win this race.
Jim, you know that district well. That's your district, correct? The 6th District. Can he win this? It's been held by a Republican for quite a while.
Jeff, I don't think any other Democrat could. It was gerrymandered, quite frankly, very irresponsibly, as are most of our congressional districts in this state, to gerrymander and protect both Democrats and Republicans. So it's a Republican district, there to protect a Republican, and I think most Democrats could not win that election. The thing he's got going for him is that the district goes all the way down the bayou, taking in Thibodaux, taking in Napoleonville, a number of Cajun areas, and it comes down, in my opinion, to a crossover. Can his charisma bring a lot of that South Louisiana vote to him? A lot of people are, if you love him or hate him, you're entertained by him. Can that charisma transfer into votes? I think he's a cinch to make the runoff, number one. And then it's a question of who he gets in the runoff with. And so if you analyze the election, quite frankly, there's a number of young candidates, very attractive candidates running, but they're going to have to beat each other up to get to that one other spot. So you've got a candidate who's not really defined himself. Edwin Edwards can spend virtually no money and make the runoff, and then it becomes a real knockdown, drag-out, quite frankly, to see whether Edwards can go over the top.
One more question to you, Jim, and this is what I find sort of interesting. One of our callers earlier said that there's a chance, in his view, that Edwin Edwards could win this thing in the first primary. Because all these Republicans will be fighting it out, and all these Republicans will be beating each other up to get into the runoff. Edwards will have sort of clear sailing, and there's a chance he might be able to win in the first. Do you see that as a possibility?
I don't. It takes 50% plus one, and that district is so split up, he can't get that. I think he's going to lead substantially, and but then it's going to be a crapshoot and a brand new ball game. He can't win it in the first, and it's going to be an uphill fight in the runoff for him, quite frankly. I think he's going to have to define his opponent, not let his opponent define themselves, and make it a pretty rough campaign in the runoff, quite frankly.
Tyler, are you surprised by this? I mean, you've written extensively about Edwin Edwards. I mean, coming up on 87 years old, running for Congress. What do you make of it?
I am surprised, Jeff. I was doubtful that he was actually going to do it until I talked to one of his close friends yesterday who confirmed to me, yes, he's in it, and that they had a poll showing very good information that he would be able to run first in the first primary. But I take up on what Jim was saying, and I defer to Jim's political analysis because he's run for office and done it successfully, and I haven't. And I read the news accounts this morning, and one thing that was missing was actual what Jeff, you've run political campaigns, you know, would be called performance.
Right.
Past performance. And so I contacted a guy here in Baton Rouge. I'm in Baton Rouge covering the legislative session right now. A guy named John Kubian, who's president of JMC Enterprises, got a great website, winwithjmc.com.
Right.
And he gave me these numbers. In 2012, the presidential election, Mitt Romney won that district with 66 to 32% over Barack Obama. In 2011, Bobby Jindal won 68% of that district. In 2010, when Charlie Melanson challenged David Vitter, Vitter won that district with 62% of the vote, and Jay Darden won that for the lieutenant governor's race with 67% of the vote. In 2008, in the Senate race, in the presidential race, John McCain won 67% of that district. So what these numbers show is kind of what Jim was talking about, that this is a Republican district, but they show so clearly that this is a very strong Republican district, as Jim again pointed out through the gerrymandering by the legislature. And of course, you know, I guess you never want to count out Edwin Edwards. He's only lost one race in his entire political career.
Right.
But the odds seem extremely, extremely steep here.
Steve, do you concur with that analysis?
Sort of. You know, the thing is that I think, and Jim can back this up, basically, as Jim mentioned, that in the last 2 years with the redistricting, that you have a lot more of the Cajuns who are going to be voting for in this election than before, and except for like 2012. So and also obviously you had, Edwards, no matter what his deficits are, you know, he's not President Obama, and in terms of, you know, Obama is despised in this state by many. Edwards is not. The name of this webinar, by the way, is a webcast. Is vote for the kook. Vote for the kook instead of vote for the crook. And so, to me, the question is whether, you know, is he gone beyond what we could, you know, expect for somebody? I mean, why is he doing this? I mean, yeah, he could win, but why in the world is he doing this? That's my question.
Well, Jim, I mean, isn't he doing it because he has a thirst for the limelight? He has a thirst for attention. I mean, he doesn't want to be retired. I mean, he still wants to be active, and now that this is an opportunity that's presented himself, he's seizing it.
When we were doing the research on the book, the Edwin Edwards book, which, by the way, is the largest selling book in the history of Louisiana by a Louisiana author.
Wow.
We're getting ready to reprint another 25,000 copies. So there is tremendous interest in the guy. And a lot of people who read the book may not vote for him, but the interest is there. But I remember asking him one time, you know, he was involved in some early business deals as a lawyer. And he said, I just don't like to practice law. What I'd like to do is to be and deal with public issues, the public limelight. And as Tyler pointed out, I think he's ran 12 times, lost 1, came back and beat the guy that beat him. He loves public life. He thrives on public life. And I can give you one very quick story. Mardi Gras, I went down on Bourbon Street on the Friday before Mardi Gras. There's a lot of public officials that we have lunch every year down there on the balcony right next to Galatoire's. There were some people out there, and a few people recognized me as kind of a has-been politician, and I threw a few beads to them. The mayor was there. Hey, how you doing? You know, just a little attention to the councilman, to the mayor, to the sheriff.
Right.
Edwin Edwards comes out on the balcony. Within minutes, the crowd went from 20 to about 400. They were hollering, and so now I'm not sure how many of those people would vote for him in a congressional.
Right.
But the guy has a magnetism that it is something very magical that we haven't seen since Chewy Long. Will that transfer into votes? And that's the question.
We're visiting with commentator Jim Brown, a former insurance commissioner here in the state of Louisiana, a good friend of Edwin Edwards, publisher of the successful Edwin Edwards book. We're visiting with reporter, author Tyler Bridges, written extensively about Edwin Edwards. Our friend Steve Sabludowski, publisher of Bayoubuzz.com, right here on Ringside WGSO. Jeff Crouere here. Our talk line 504-556-9696 if you want to chime in, talking about the whole Edwin Edwards announcement yesterday that's got this sort of state abuzz with interest and excitement about his potential candidacy. Tyler, you've studied Edwin Edwards. I've never really known Edwin Edwards to have a real keen interest in national sort of the politics up in Washington. Seems to his focus in the past has been more on, you know, state issues, you know, dealing with the legislature, dealing with all of our issues here in Louisiana. Do you think this is sort of a natural fit for him to be going up to that very partisan environment up in Washington if he is elected?
Jeff, it's not. And he served 3 terms in Congress in the 1960s, and by all accounts, he didn't really enjoy it. He was often absent, and what he really wanted was to become governor, and he used that representing Acadiana in Congress as kind of a launching pad to run for governor. I asked some people close to him yesterday, why is he running? One of them said that he had asked Edwards himself the question, and as, what else am I going to do? Which is a bit of a surprise. Remember, he's got a 7-month-old son, and I've been told that he's a very doting father.
Right.
He's got a young wife, and you might think he'd want to be retired, but I think Jim captured it very aptly. This is a guy who's been running for office really since the 1950s, and I think the longest period of time he was not running for office was the 8.5 years he was in federal prison. And getting back to the motivation, I have a bit of a theory, and I'd like to test this theory on Jim. Jim, you have some recent experience, similar experience with Edwin Edwards, and I'm wondering if this would provide some insight. Is there a sense that as Edwin Edwards gets out of prison that he wants some sort of personal redemption so that his last public act was not going off to federal prison?
I think definitely there's some rehabilitation and remaking of his image involved. You know, he is very gleefully talks about the fact that that the U.S. attorney that brought the charges against him and the key prosecutor, Jim Linton, that tried his case, both have resigned in disgrace from their positions in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I think he sees this as one more step in his legacy of being able to say, look, people of Louisiana were forgiving, he's gotten back, and he's moved forward. So there's certainly a strong element to that, Tyler, exactly what you're analyzing in terms of what he's doing. Other thing, too, if I can mention this, too, you mentioned his young wife and his young child. I think his young wife, who's very political, you know, she set up his Facebook page, his Twitter, and his whole social media. She's been a real pusher here, there too. I think she enjoys politics. I find her very adept. She's got about 11,000 followers herself on her Facebook page. She set up the website. So she's a strong motivating force behind his desire to run.
But Jim, she's a Republican, right?
Well, hey, the crossover vote. The crossover.
There you go.
68%. You got to have some Republicans to win this thing. And hey, look, I married a Republican. I can really cross both sides of the aisle, you see. That's a plus for him.
All right, let's take some calls, gentlemen. We're visiting with Jim Brown, Tyler Bridges, Steve Sabludowski, Jeff Cruier here at Ringside WGSO. Our talk line 504-556-9696. Let's go to our friend Mike in Harvey. Hey, Mike, good morning. Welcome.
Hey, what up, Jeff? Quick comment about Edwin Edwards. I don't think he has a shot to win, but I think it's just an excuse to start a super PAC for him and his cronies like the Larios to kind of just live off of for the rest of his life.
Okay, that's an interesting sort of angle to this thing. Gentlemen, what do you think about that? Steve, let me start with you. That this is not about winning the election, but about starting a super PAC whereby he can then have another income source to live on for the next few years.
Well, given what Bobby Jindal's doing in terms of super PAC and all, I mean, I think I believe anything at this point. So yeah, I mean, that's certainly a possibility, although I tend to believe that what Jim's saying is probably more accurate, and that is that he promised us that when he won, or when he ran against David Duke, that this would be his last hurrah, and that he would prove to the world that he had changed. And so he disappointed many of us, and so I think this is kind of his last hurrah. And I'm wondering whether or not his wife is thinking of being the next Lindy Boggs.
Whereby she would then take his
86
place.
86 years old. I mean, 86 years old. I wouldn't recommend you get on a plane.
504-556-9696, 888-429-1330. Gentlemen, let's take some more calls. Let's go out to Mid-City and bring on Rhonda. Hey, Rhonda, how are you? Good morning.
Hi, Jeff. How are you? I love your show.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to comment on Mr. Edwin Edwards. Okay, true. I don't even know that much about him. I moved here from Ohio. But I'm going to tell you something, Jeff. I like him. He's got a lot of character. But let me say this. I think we're opening up a can of worms we can't deal with. Because let's say this. A criminal is a criminal, okay? If he's done time, okay. If we accept him and show him all this love, what's the difference with the rest of the guys getting out of jail and trying to do something, okay? If you support one criminal, you got to support all of them. Do you understand what I mean?
So it's opening up a can of worms is what you're saying.
Yeah, because hey, even though he's a great guy, I really do. I like him a lot. But he's still, he's still got in trouble. He's a felon, okay? And it's just strange to me how people can be so accepting of him, but we got guys coming out of jail trying to turn their lives around. No support.
So, Rhonda, real quick before I let you go, if we elect him, would that hurt our image as a state? Would that make us sort of a laughingstock nationally, you think?
I think especially with the Ray Nagin debacle that just went down. I think we need to take that more seriously.
All right.
I like him. Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Rhonda. And I think that's a universal opinion, Tyler. People like him. But there's a question of whether we want to have him represent us in Congress, and what does that do for our image, Tyler, if he's elected?
Well, it's the circus atmosphere. It's a lot of the stereotypes of Louisiana that many people would prefer not to be told outside of the state. But I was struck, and I have been struck by the reaction, and this is sort of going back to what Jim was talking about on the Friday before Mardi Gras. I think it's a really telling anecdote. The stories that I've heard around the state of Edwin Edwards getting great reactions. For example, he was invited to give a talk about a year ago in Monroe, which is very bastion conservatism, at the Chamber of Commerce luncheon. It was sold out. And he got a great response. And in fact, the first time I saw Edwards, my book is called Bad Bet on the Bayou, The Rise of Gambling in Louisiana and the Fall of Governor Edwards. And Jim published Edwards's autobiography written with Leo Honeycutt. But the first time I saw Edwards was a little over a year ago after he'd gotten out of prison, and it was the first time that I had seen him after my book had been published, because he had gone up to prison. And when I saw him, we bumped into each other at an event of former governors at the Hilton, and he'd said to me, I said, "Governor, I hear you're getting a great response everywhere you go around the state." And then he couldn't answer me because he got diverted. And after the event, he came up to me and he said, "Tyler, you know why I'm getting such a great reaction around the state?" He said, "It's because people are reading my book and not your book."
That's typical. That's typical. And boy, we saw him, Steve, on Politics with a Punch. He was in rare form. I mean, he was so witty. He just went with the flow. And we had an overflow crowd there. And, yeah, people are just attracted to him.
Absolutely. And let me just throw a little fly in this ointment, if you don't mind, and that is that, yeah, look, I'm glad I'm not voting, that I can't vote in that election. But, there's a lot of people who are out there blaming and blasting Edwards, yet they're willing to go ahead and vote for David Vitter. Now, I know that obviously, Edwards is a felon. He was adjudicated to be so. David Vitter got off because of prescription, statute of limitation. We're talking about a Bible Belt thumping conservative, a family values guy who was cavorting according, to assuming his admission with prostitutes, which is, which is a federal felony. Mm-hmm. And, all I'm saying is that I think that the Republicans go after Edwards and say, oh, well, they got to at least admit that they have some guys up there who are not so unblemished.
Well, of course, the only difference, Steve, is 8.5 years in prison, wouldn't you say? And a conviction.
Well, there's a difference, but we're talking about statute of limitations. And Vitter was going to take the Fifth Amendment. Right. Okay?
But, so, I mean, look, you're convicting him without a trial. I mean, there's no evidence presented. We don't know. We don't know the story about that. That's all hearsay.
I didn't. What? It's hearsay? It's hearsay.
About, what kind of relationship he had and what really happened there. We saw his name on a list. We don't know. He never really told us. We don't know the story.
Okay, fine. Then maybe he ought to tell us, don't you think?
That's a whole other issue. But, I mean, I wouldn't compare him to Edwin Edwards. I don't think that's fair to him.
Well, I think that if you're going to blast Edwards for his felony, and I think he should be blasted, don't get me wrong, I think that it's time for the people to start to ask questions too, if they're going to also blast Governor Edwards.
We'll see. I think it'll be fair game when he runs for governor. Jump in.
Can I jump in for a moment?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the larger point here is the willingness of Louisiana voters, and it's not just in Louisiana. We've seen it throughout our history of people to forgive people, to forgive a politician who's been disgraced.
Right.
But again, and so going back to what Jim said earlier, if anybody could win this, if any Democrat could win this district, I suppose it is Edwin Edwards. Clearly the demographics are against him, but maybe through his entertaining nature, people willing to forgive him, as they did, many Republicans did David Vitter, maybe in the end he could squeak it out.
All right, let's squeeze in one more, gentlemen, because we're up against the clock here. Let's go to Michael in Mandeville. Hey, Michael, good morning, sir. How are you?
Hey, Jeff, I got to tell you, I'm tickled by this whole topic today because, when I think about Edwin Edwards and what's happened in the history of our state and where we should be positioned with all the assets that we have in the state and all the things that we have, all the great things in the state, I'm just amazed that people would even consider it. I mean, I know they love the idea of good old Eddie, and we think this was politics as a sport, and well, he didn't mean it. Edwin Edwards was great for the state. I hear all these comments all the time, and I'm just amazed by it. But this is what's put this country in the position we're in right now. But in a sense, it's kind of funny. Let's send our crook and compete with the other crooks up in Washington, and that's all I have to say about it.
All right, that's Michael in Mandeville. And, gentlemen, that's a sentiment I get from a lot of listeners that, hey, he had his chance. He didn't deliver. I mean, he engaged in criminal behavior. Why give him another chance? It's an embarrassment. And let's just say he is elected, Jim. Can you see him going up to Washington in a minority situation, working for the Democrats in a Republican-controlled Congress, and having the, stamina to represent this area for the long term? Isn't Congress all about building seniority?
Well, it used to be, but if you look at the three leading candidates for the Republican nomination for president, Rand Paul leading all the polls, Ted Cruz, and Mario Rubio, 1, 2, 3, they have each served in the U.S. Senate for about 2 years, brand new to the scene. And so a new person can make a difference, number one. Number two, what's seniority really? I've heard about all this seniority. Our wetlands are in devastation. The state's got all these problems. Are we going to blame all that on Edwin Edwards? Where's all the seniority up in Washington, D.C. we've had, Jeff, that really, in my opinion, going all the way back to Russell Long, hasn't really meant a heck of a lot for Louisiana. So those are kind of iffy questions. You get into how much good you can do. How much good has any congressman done over a period of time, except be one of many to try to form coalitions to vote and try to hopefully improve some legislation. So in the scheme of things, no, I don't think that makes a lot of difference.
All right. Any final words, Steve, before we conclude?
Sure. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to our guests. And again, this is live on Bayoubuzz.com. It will put this. It will remain on the website. You can also see it on Facebook. Jeff, thank you so much for this opportunity to discuss this very interesting.
I want to thank you, Steve Sabadowski, Tyler Bridges, Jim Brown. Great discussion, gentlemen. We'll do it again. Quick time out. We'll be back.
WGSO 990.